Okay, so we got a new packet, and so we're going to dive right in. This is going to take us to the end of the chapter, and then we'll figure out what to do from there. It probably won't be a while. So we're going to start again with the story we started last week. Just get us through the first paragraph, and then we'll move on. So it's at the front, the top, the 157. It's the first page of the packet. Everybody see where at the very beginning.
It's read like a Hebrew book. Mine is stapled.
Yeah. V'yamai karele rosha medabrim b'kol makom. So reflecting back on Rabbi Yehuda, why was he called the head speaker? It's interesting. That's the introduction of the story. But now we have the story. Diatve Rabbi Yehuda. So we have Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon. It's three rabbis. Yehuda, Yossi, and Shimon were sitting together. V'yativ Yehuda ben Gerim Gabahu. And Judah, the son of converts, who was a convert, so the storyteller is going out of his way to tell us there was a convert among them. Now this Yehuda might be the same Yehuda who later becomes the chief spokesperson, but you also have another Yehuda, and it's not clear. Although I'll tell you what I think when we get to the end. Patach Rabbi Yehuda v'amar. So Rabbi Yehuda opens this conversation with these three rabbis. Remember, there's another guy, this convert, who is overhearing what's going on. But you have the three rabbis speaking. And one says, Yehuda says, Kama na'im ma'asehim shel umazo. How wonderful are the deeds of this nation. This nation meaning the Romans, the occupying power. So they're in a Roman city, in Palestine, but a Roman-style city, probably Yavna. Tiknu shavakim. Now we have marketplaces. Tiknu gisharim. They made bridges. Tiknu marchatzaot. They had bathhouses. These are all things the Romans brought to us and how they improve our life. Rabbi Yosef shatak. So Rabbi Yossi didn't say anything. An awkward silence. He's not responding. Because remember, the guy's complimenting Rome, and Rome is the enemy, the occupying power. So Rabbi Yossi doesn't say anything. Na'ana Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Amar. But Rabbi Shimon answers, Kol masha tiknu, everything they made, lo tiknu ela l'tzorach atzman. Everything they made, they just made for themselves. Tiknu shvakim. They make marketplaces, lahashiv bahen zonot, so they can buy for themselves prostitutes. That's rather cynical. The whole purpose of the marketplace is for the Romans to get prostitutes. I don't know. So he's cynical about it. Marchatzaot le'edan bahen atzman. They have bathhouses just so they can enjoy themselves physically, no other reason. It's not a generosity of spirit. It's for their own benefit. Gisharim, and why do they have bridges? Litol bahen meches, so they can collect taxes. So everything is for their nefarious needs. Really, their sort of gross, seedy needs, prostitutes and warm baths. And then they need the money, so they build bridges so they can collect taxes. Anyhow, that's Shimon's critique. And it seems to be a critique not just of the Romans here. It seems to be a deeper critique of modern technological society, ends up corrupting. All right. Halach Yehuda ben Gerim v'siper divrehem. So this Yehuda, this may be the Yehuda who talks too much. Remember, the story starts by asking, why do they call him the head talker? Well, here he squeals, right? So because he goes to talk to the Roman authorities. So when they told the Romans what they'd said, V'nishma'u l'malchut. It doesn't necessarily mean that he went and told the Romans. He could have just told people. Eventually the Romans hear about it. So, this may be a warning about gossip in general. So we don't really know whether he was an informant, someone that goes and tells the Romans, or he might have been just someone that gossiped, and eventually, either way, he causes great damage, because the Romans hear about it. So they say, Amru, Romans said, Yehuda she'ilah yitaleh. So the Yehuda, this is the other Yehuda, who praised us, he will be exalted. Who exalted us, we'll exalt him. I don't know, we'll give him a promotion. We'll make him in charge of some city somewhere. It doesn't say. Yossi sheshatak, so Yossi who said nothing, who didn't defend us, Yigalel at Tzipori, he has to leave town, he has to go to Tzipori, which we find out is actually much more of a Jewish town. It doesn't have the bathhouses and the marketplaces. It's in Palestine, but it's not a Roman-style town. So he's got to go there. Shimon Shagina Yehareg. And Shimon, that criticized us, he has to be killed. We'll put a warrant out for his arrest and for his death. That's where we stopped last time. Okay, I'm going to continue now. Any questions just quickly before we continue? All right. Azal hu uverei tashu beit midrasha. So he takes his son, and he hides in the Beit Midrash, in the study house. Okay, so very interesting things. We're not going to be able to get to bottom of every element of the story. I've just noticed, because I've been reading the story a lot, it's interesting to me that he takes his son with him. Like, why does he take his son? I mean, the son's not in trouble.
Because they may take vengeance on his son so that they eliminate his whole family.
Okay, so it could be, although then he could take his wife too. He doesn't take his wife.
But this is the transmission of what he believed into the next
Yeah,
generation.
so he's got his own selfish needs maybe for taking his son. He doesn't seem to ask his son, like, you want to come with me to exile? I mean, maybe the son would have said yes. The implication here is that the son's young. I'm focusing here on the son because there's some stories on the son that come up later, which I'll share if we have time. But anyway, interesting to me. Just he goes into hiding, but he grabs his son. Okay.
We did the same thing as Abraham.
Yeah.
The same thing as Abraham did. He took his son, his
Yeah.
only son, and
Right.
didn't ask his son.
It's not quite as bad as that. I mean, he's not taking his son to kill him. He's taking his son to go with him into hiding.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting decision. I mean, he might just have social needs too. He doesn't want to be alone. He knows that going into hiding is a really solitary enterprise, so he wants someone to go with him. You'll see the arc of this, and we learned this in a different class, but the arc of this is that Shimon is slowly escaping into his own world from the great big world, the great big outside world, which is symbolized by the Roman city itself. So now he goes to the Beit Midrash, but he's not totally alone. He's got his son with him. Also, the Beit Midrash is still a human place, but you'll see he slowly sinks into isolation and away from human society. But the son's always with him, which I think is an interesting fact.
He may have done it to protect his son, too.
Could be. We don't know. But like I said,
there's a death sentence out against him.
But he doesn't take his wife with him, too.
Right, but if they can't
Right.
find him, they may take his son or torture him, and so I think you can describe multiple motives, good
Right.
and bad.
I guess we don't know. Yeah.
Could also
Yes.
have been the
It
link
seems so
to,
unusual that this is the first time I ever remember seeing a relationship between what the rabbis are saying and the world around them. It
Yeah.
always seems like it's just within the community,
Yeah.
this law, that law, and all of a sudden it has such repercussions.
Yeah.
It surprised me.
Yeah. No, it's there. Yeah. Yeah, there's stories about the Romans all through the Talmud. Yeah, the Romans are, by the way, the bad guys. And I think the author understands that the reader is not sympathizing with the Romans, but it's still a very interesting story. Let me keep going. Kol yom ahava maite le devetu. So every day his bait. Remember, I've talked about this before. The Aramaic word for wife is bait, which means home. Right. So it's I think in some ways a lovely, little definition of what a spouse is. A spouse is your home. And here that's just they used it in normal conversation. His bayit, his wife would bring him rifta v'chuza d'maya chrache. She'd bring him bread and water, and they would eat. Ki takif gezerta. Okay, so the decree became stronger. I'm not sure what that means, other than they would spend more and more time looking for him. Right, and the Beit Midrash suddenly became not such a safe place to hide. When that happened, Amar le livrei, he said to his son, Nashim da'atan kala. Women have a weak will. Okay. I often leave that part out when I teach this story, only because I don't feel like dealing with the complications. But in this class we don't leave anything out. So that's what he says, and it's clearly a prejudice he has. And you'll see he doesn't come off so well in the story, and that line very much implicates him. So I'm going to keep reading for a second. Nashim da'atan kala. Women have a weak will. Alehen dilma mitzare le umigali alan. So it's possible that they would torture her, and because of her weak will, she will give us up. So we'd better hide. Now what's interesting, and again, the story can be read in different ways. I mean, we don't really know what happens to his wife after the story. She doesn't. We have a few epilogues to the story, but we don't know what happens to her. It's possible that they did torture her. And that she doesn't know where he is. I mean, when he says it could be that the Romans will torture her, I mean, one thing he could do is make sure he gets her out of town also, and he doesn't do that. Well, we don't know that he does that. All it seems like is, well, I'm worried about my wife. She may be tortured, and then, she'll inform on us. We better get out of here. But he doesn't seem to have a lot of concern for his wife. And in some ways that fits, if you read the story as Rabbi Shimon's gradual disappearance from human society. So now he's kind of thrown his wife under the bus. He's left the Romans, he's left Jewish society, because that's the Beit Midrash. He's left his wife. What he's got, though, still is his son. So he still clings to his son, which is the teaching relationship, which I think is central to his definition of himself. Let's keep going. Azlu tasha b'marata. So now they go to a cave. So the cave is a fully natural environment. It's not human environment at all. It's just, if you want to say who created it, God created, as opposed to the Beit Midrash or the Roman city where humans created. So he's in a cave. Itrachish Nisa, so there was a miracle, meaning it's not natural, it's supernatural. So there was a miracle. Ivre Lehu Charuva, so there was carob, Ve'ena Demaya, and there was suddenly a well of water. So he's got everything he needs now for nutrition. That's all you need to eat, by the way, carob and water. He eats it for 12 years, so it's a long, it seems to work. But it's a miracle too. Now here's also a weird part of the story, but you get it when you understand really what's happening to him. V'havu mishalche manayu, so they took off their clothes. Clothes also represent human society, so they take off their clothes. They're in the cave, where they really go back to primitivity, but also aloneness. They're not with anybody. They take off their clothes. V'hava yatve at savareo b'chala, and they would cover themselves up in sand, I guess to protect their bodies or for modesty's sake. Doesn't even say. Yeah, both of them. And kula yama garse, so every day they would study. The garis there is an interesting word, Aramaic word that just means to kind of mumble. So they would mumble and read and recite, but it means they would study. They didn't bring books with them, so they were doing everything by heart. Just one quick comment. The reader would understand that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was a great mystic. So what were they studying? They were studying mystical texts. And later he's the attributed author of the Zohar. So then you come to think that's what he wrote there in the cave with his son. And the Zohar presents itself as being the work of Shimon Bar Yochai in the cave. Were we going to...
Could that be why he brought his son, so that he could still study?
I think so, yes. I think it was to fulfill his selfish need to have someone to study with. Because studying is the one thing you can't do on your own. Everything else, he'll just escape from. Everything else. He doesn't need a baker to buy food from. He doesn't need a tailor to make his clothes. He doesn't need anything. He's got the carob, he's got the water. What does he need? One person to study with. So he grabs his son, who's got no choice. Okay.
Of course, burying yourself in sand means you're not wearing your clothes all day long every day with no way to clean them and whatever. So
Right. It gets to that, yeah. You'll see that. But Idan Salue is exactly what you said. Wouldn't they pray? Livashu michse umetzale. So when it came time to pray, and praying is not the same thing as studying here. So they would spend their day studying, but they have to daven. There are times they have to daven. Then they would put on their clothes because it's for some reason it's not nice to pray. When you're buried in sand, you have to have clothes on. So they put on their clothes, like that was their Shabbos outfit. Was their only clothes. Then they would pray. V'hadar mishalchu menayu, and then they would take off the clothes after praying. So they wouldn't wear them out. So it was also, like you said, it was a very strategic thing to do. So they wouldn't wear out their clothes. They would just put them on for the special occasion of prayer. The rest of the time they would bury themselves in sand. Now, my question is, and we can think about this, what's the point of the sand anyway? From the point of view of the storyteller, I think the storyteller is trying to show how Shimon is gradually it could be modesty. That's like the quick answer. But also, symbolically, it could be, we're seeing he's kind of sinking into the earth and becoming a natural man. This is a natural man. He's of the earth. And he doesn't eat. He eats only things that are natural, organic. He's like the ultimate organic guy. Total retreat from technological society, from human society. He's almost of the earth.
Yeah, he's also trying to completely negate the physical self and just make the spiritual self in isolation and trying to exist as that. Totally eliminating the physical self. There's no need for the physical self.
Almost as if he's burying himself, like he's dead. That's when you're dead. What are you doing? You've negated your physical self completely. It's the good news and the bad news about being dead. So the bad news is you're dead. The good news is, you've managed to kind of really transcend your physical body. You don't need the body anymore. Unfortunately, you can only do it by dying.
He's sort of Adam in reverse.
Yeah, Adam in reverse is going back to the earth. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it's certainly an interesting image.
But he still maintains his mental self.
Yeah. Well, the mental self is sort of the spiritual side. That's, in fact, the image is he's buried up to his neck. So it's almost like he only becomes the neck. Yeah, it becomes the head. That's all he becomes at that point. The rest of it is just, he doesn't care about anything else. Except when he prays. So anyway, let's keep going.
This wouldn't play well today.
The story or the action?
The whole action.
Itvu Tresar Shane b'Marata. So he's in the cave for 12 years. The 12, for some reason, a lot of interesting details here, is important because it comes up later. He's there for 12 years. Ata Eliyahu. So Elijah the prophet comes. So, Elijah the prophet never died, roams the earth. So Elijah decides to show up at the mouth of the cave. V'kama Pichet Marata. He stands at the mouth of the cave. Doesn't go in the cave, but he stands at the mouth of the cave. Amar. Man lode devar Yochai demet Kesar uvatil gezirte. Who's going to tell the son of Yochai? So who's going to tell? Shimon? Well, he knows he's there. It's Elijah's kind of roundabout way of telling him, you can come out now. So his roundabout way of saying it, who's going to inform Rabbi Shimon that the old emperor is dead? So therefore, the ordinance has been canceled. The death penalty has been canceled, and you're actually free to come out. So why doesn't Elijah just go in? That's really interesting, I think. It's an interesting question. Somehow the cave really is fully and totally belongs to Shimon. Even Elijah can't go in. Or Elijah doesn't want to go in because Elijah recognizes something warped about the cave and doesn't want to approve of the lifestyle. You'll see that in a second. Anyway, Nafku. So they go out. So, and they see, this is the first thing they see when they come out is people planting and sowing. So people are engaging in what for them is technological society, work, the stuff that you need to do to survive. Exactly what he didn't do for the 12 years in the cave because it was all provided for him. But that's the first thing they see. It's like if it happened to us, the first thing we see is cars whizzing past and factories, all this evidence of an advanced technological society. You don't come out and see Buddhist monks, chanting and engaged in the spiritual world. The first thing you come out in downtown Manhattan, that's not what you're going to see. Probably not. It's not going to be your impression. Your impression is going to be an advanced technological society where people are trying to make a living in the physical world. So that's what they see.
Like the original Rip Van Winkle.
Yeah, well, it is a Rip Van Winkle story. There's other Rip Van Winkle stories in the Talmud too. Of course, cultures have those too. Anyway, but it's only been 12 years.
Yeah. Got another 8 to go.
Right. Amar. So they said, or he said, or one of them said, Manichim chaye olam v'oskim b'chaye sha'ah. They give up eternal life. So eternal life is how they consider their life in the cave. That's eternal life. That's fully spiritual. And you start to understand, like the casting off of the clothes wasn't just practical at some point. It was that we can live in a world that transcends time and space, in our own little bubble of eternality. And that's what we were able to do 12 years in the cave. Now look at these people. They give that up because they could do it too. We did it. They could do it too, but they don't do it. They abandon eternality. And look what they're doing. They're just earning a living, farming.
It's almost a repeat of the Garden of Eden.
It's a reverse of it. They come out of that. Yeah. Well, they think what they're in is a Garden of Eden.
That's right.
And there are some echoes of the Garden of Eden. You've got the carob and the water and everything taken care of. On the other hand, it's a none of us would imagine that as paradise. You're in the cave, buried up to your neck all day, and you're just learning. I mean, our image of the Garden of Eden is much different than that, I have to say. I don't think that's what we imagine in the Garden of Eden. First of all, you've got Eve.
You've got eternal life, which is what Adam and Eve gave up when they were thrust out.
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
In that sense, it's like going back.
Well, in both cases, it's leaving the garden of total and full protection of God and going to a place where you have to take care of yourself, the real world, what we call the real world. So they object to the real world. You'll see this. Kol makom shenotnim einehem miyad nisraf. Wherever they put their eyes, it burns up. So they become so angry at what they see in the world, technological society, people working and earning a living, that they destroy it. Their anger becomes actual and physical, and they become almost like terrorists. So they're like terrorists that object to the material world, like the Unabomber. You remember the Unabomber? Was really felt just like Rabbi Shimon says in the beginning of the story that anything that has to do with technological society is inherently corrupt. It just leads to human corruption and should be destroyed. And so they become so angry about it. These people could be just davening and studying all day, and they're working on their own sort of physical needs. That's disgusting. I'm going to blow that up, and that becomes their attitude.
One could ask, what did they learn in 12 years.
That's what they learned.
How did they get the power to destroy?
How they get? First of all, it's just a story. So
Come on.
So in the context of the story, you do have instances in the Talmud where emotions are so dramatic that they actually take on a life of their own. So it's not so uncommon a motif in the Talmud. It happens. People get so angry, so embarrassed that people die. It creates shipwrecks. It's I think you can give that to the storyteller as something that you just have to accept it.
It's like a parable.
It's like a parable, right. Yeah. I'm not sure it actually happened that way.
Unless the Kelp tree was a fantastic.
Stop being so literal.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, you could ask that about several details in the story. Where'd that carob tree come from? How's it possible? Right.
So they said it was a miracle.
Right. All right, Yatzta bat Kol, Elijah, the appearance of Elijah. There's all sorts of elements, just a folktale here, and you just accept the different elements and you kind of learn from the story. Yatzta bat Kol, so a voice came from God. This time it's not Elijah, so a bat Kol seems to be a message from God, a voice from God. Ve'amra lahem, it said to them, Lachriv olami yatzatem, have you come out to destroy my world? So here the voice is disapproving, very much disapproving of their attitude. Hating technological society and saying, look, I didn't free you from the cave to destroy my world. What's interesting here is that God identifies that as my world. That's my world. You think my world is just the cave buried in dirt. My world is people making a living and building skyscrapers. That's also my world. And in destroying that and living a life, making a living. That's my world too. You think God's world is just the praying and the studying, the world of escape. In fact, you've got it reversed. My world is out here in the cave, and I can't let you out in the world because you're just going to destroy it. Go back to your cave. So God actually banishes them to the cave. And now we start to understand also, by the way, that the cave, which maybe Shimon had understood as a reward, and like paradise and an escape, the cave, in fact, all along was a punishment. Now for sure it's a punishment. God says, go back to your cave. You are not fit for human society. You might think that you are too good for human society. I'm reversing it. You are not fit for human society. The cave now becomes like a jail to them, which it was all along, by the way. Yeah. It was never voluntary. Like, let's go and go to a Buddhist retreat for 12 years. They went to the cave because they had no choice, because they were being chased by the government. So now they're being chased back there by God. Okay. And the question is, do they now understand that it's a punishment and not their retreat? So apparently they do. Hadur Ezal v'etve tresar yarcheshata. So they go back, doesn't say what they did, but they're there for 12 months. So the 12 is important too. I'm not sure why, because they were there for 12 years. Now it's just 12 months. The 12, you'll see, becomes important for them for interesting reasons. But anyhow, did they bury themselves in sand, eat the carob? Probably. Maybe they did the same thing. Doesn't say what they did for the 12 months. Anyway, after 12 months, Amrei mishpat u'sha'im begehenem shnei masar chodesh. So people that are wicked and are assigned to Gehenna in the next world are only sentenced to 12 months. So now they understand that they were sentenced to the cave. The cave here is a punishment. Now people, they say, that are punished in the next world are only punished for 12 months. So our sentence must be up. On their own, they leave. Yatzta bat kol v'amra. And now, because they come to that realization, a voice comes out and says to them, Su'u mimaratchem. Now you can go out of your cave. Your sentence is up. Okay. But now I want to know what happens. Because last time they went out, they became destructive, nihilistic. Right, destroying anything they see that speaks of human creativity. Nafku, they go out. So now, wherever Rabbi Elazar would destroy, so Rabbi Elazar, first time we have his name. It's the son. It's the first time he's actually called by a name, and the name that the story calls him here is Rabbi. So did he get ordained? Is he suddenly a rabbi? Or is it the narrator that's just saying later the guy becomes a rabbi? Anyway, the son is still a nihilist. He's still a terrorist. He's still destroying things. Whatever he looks at, and the implication is that technological societies he sees, he's still so angry that he destroys it. Now, I'm very interested in Rabbi Elazar, who's not a main character in the story, but later becomes a character in the Talmud too. So if we have some time in a couple of weeks, I'll show you some of his stories. But what's interesting is he who learned from his father, right? I mean, what happened in the cave? Rabbi Shimon brought him along, and it's been suggested so he has someone to study with. Probably Rabbi Shimon is teaching him. So Elazar clearly learned the lesson, but this often happens to a student. Very often when the student is a son, the student becomes even more fanatical than the teacher. So now Rabbi Elazar, he still has that fanaticism, because part of what they learned in the cave is to hate technological society, to hate the Romans, to hate everything the Romans built. So Rabbi Elazar, even though he was back in the cave for 12 months, he's still destructive. So wherever, and we just learned his name. So Kol Hecha Dahavi Macha Rabbi Elazar Havu Mase Rabbi Shimon. So Rabbi Shimon's eyes are now healing. So wherever now Rabbi Elazar would strike with his destructive eyes, Rabbi Shimon would heal with his healing eyes. Interesting scene, or interesting thing to watch. Let me just finish the line. Amarlo. And so Shimon says to him, Bini, my son, Dai la'olam aniva ata. You and I are enough for the world. What does he mean by that? What does he mean by that? So one thing he means is, you destroy, I heal. All right? We're a perfect match.
A balance.
So it does seem to mean that in one sense, like we balance each other perfectly. But when he says that also, he says, Dai la'olam, like the world would be sufficient if only there could be a world with just the two of us. That was such a perfect world in the cave. Although they're coming out now. So, or maybe he's calming down his son and saying, look, you and I, we have this perfect world together. We don't need to be in the cave. As long as we're together, we've got that perfect world. It's an interesting thing that he says. So some questions?
I see a certain parallel here between these two and some of the Haredim in Israel today, who are supported by the state, but they study all day long, and then they go out protesting and burning police cars and destroying property.
Well, there's a fanaticism too, and they also hate the state. It's not just the Jewish state; they hate the manifestations of statehood, because they view it with contempt. Those guys, they care about traffic lights. We're doing the real stuff. Even serving in the army, they're serving they're cleaning their guns, but we are studying the real stuff. I think Haredim read the story and they get the wrong message. The story seems to me to be a lesson against that attitude in the end, how destructive that can be. But they're looking at that and they're reading it and they're thinking, yeah, that's what we want. We want to be in that cave. That's exact. We want to be buried up to our. If only we could do that. Remember, Shimon Bar Yochai is a hero in some stories in the Talmud. We'll have some time to discuss the full implications of the story when we're done. We're not done yet. Yeah. Let me ask. Yeah.
Why are sons or children more fanatical than?
That's just in my experience. Often students become more fanatical than the teachers themselves. Maybe because they're young. I've just noticed it. It's an interesting phenomenon. Yeah.
Well, it's not 100%.
No.
Rebel.
No. Right. Yes. So Elazar is obviously a case where he took the lessons a little too seriously. Yeah, and Shimon seems to have learned the lesson from Elijah. Where Elijah says, "You've become destructive," because Shimon is now healing things. So Shimon, I think, grows in the story, while Elazar grows fanatically, and it doesn't. So, what were you gonna say?
I was going to say the sons had such a sheltered upbringing.
Right.
That's all that he's known.
Right.
And maybe as a parent,
12 years.
It was initially very selfish for him to bring him into the cave, and then you realize, oh my gosh, and
that's
now
right.
I want to right that wrong.
Right. Yeah, because Shimon's had positive experiences in the world, where Elazar's only experiences really has been in the cave with his father.
Right.
Everything else is foreign to him.
When he goes into the cave, he already refers to him as Rabbi Elazar.
Oh, does it?
Yes.
I leave it on top, maybe.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So I missed that. I thought it was the first time we heard the word. But no, my reading of the story, which is that, and you'll see in later stories about Rabbi Elazar, he was a child. So let's say he was like 5, something like that too. So when he comes out, he's 17. So these are really formative years. Yeah, I think the author is referring to him as Rabbi Elazar because he's a well-known character by himself. And some of this is the story of Rabbi Elazar growing.
So if you're quoted in the Talmud, it sounds like some sort of reverence.
Yeah.
How did he earn this reverence?
Who?
Elazar.
Well, because he also was a famous rabbi. He was an authority. He was an halachic authority. He was an authority on Jewish law. And he was a leader. He became a leader too.
If you became an authority, it's because you learned more than, it's not idiosyncratic learning. It's learning in a community. And he hadn't done that. So still don't understand.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a question between being self-taught, being self-taught, being homeschooled. Like, is anybody that homeschooled, do you not get positions of authority because you were homeschooled and you were in a bubble? Some might make that argument. This is sort of a radical version of homeschooling.
In homeschooling is social interaction.
Yeah, so it's missing.
Which is what he's missing.
That's right. But that's your critique of homeschooling. Some people defend it. All right, let's